what if this is the new normal?
Exactly.
Then what is going to happen to millions of children that have no access to the internet? You still have multilateral corporations, making so much money off the internet. The internet is still incredibly expensive in some places. In some places, you have no access whatsoever. So what if this is the new normal for the next 5 years? Then you can see that the children of the rich, of the wealthy, are going to progress, and then the children of the very vulnerable are going to become even more vulnerable. So you have more people falling back into traps of poverty. You have more young people unable.
Hello and welcome to a new version of Tea with Tove on Zoom. Thanks Coronavirus! Today I'm talking to Ritah to talk about how COVID-19 is actually affecting young people, particularly in African nations. What are the challenges, what are the implications, and actually what are the opportunities for all of this? So join me in welcoming Ritah.
Hey! Hi, how are you? What do you think are the challenges right now that are facing young people when it comes to COVID-19?
You have schools closing, you have businesses closing, you have people losing jobs. I was reading a report by UNICA, and they were estimating that up to 27 million Africans could lose jobs. It is unbelievable. It is worrying because we are talking about a continent that was already having challenges, creating jobs and sustaining decent jobs for people. And young people obviously are at the receiving end of this, because a great number of them work in jobs that are not secure. So you're working for a restaurant and then suddenly it closes. You don't have an option, right? But also we are talking about disrupting delivery of social services. We are talking about healthcare, for instance. But right now, you have a scenario where, for instance, in Uganda, you cannot just go to any health facility. I've seen stories of women dying by the roadside, because pregnant women dying by the roadside who are trying to access, a delivery bed or
Wow.
health. So it is scary. It is scary also in the sense that there are some achievements, some kind of progress that as a continent we were making, in terms of creating decent jobs, for instance, in terms of social protection measures and safety nets for the very poor. All of these are no longer going to be possible, because there is no way you can start talking about social protection for the elderly, for instance, if the government is trying to secure funding to expand its its access to ventilators or to professionals from Cuba that will help it to handle the pandemic. You have about 34% of the urban poor without access to water.
Wow.
We are talking about something as basic as water. And then you're telling them to wash their hands with soap. We do not know if they have access to soap. I feel that this is a conversation that has been around for quite a while, even with the HIV and AIDS pandemic. You had people asking, am I going to buy a condom? Am I going to choose between between a condom and food, for instance? If you are in a war-torn country and you need to buy food, but then you also need to have sex with your wife, do you have to? You understand?
Yeah, so it's like making hard choices that has existed even before COVID came about.
Exactly. Yes. And it is sad that we should be. It is totally unacceptable that we are even having these kinds of conversations right now, because we have been rallying governments, lobbying stakeholders, and talking about creating decent jobs so that, you know, people have some money in their pockets, so that people can then sort of like spur economic growth, which would then result in development. And, you know, somehow the conversation has always gone back to governments corrupt, they are not doing enough, they are not putting in place the systems that are required. If those systems are there, they're actually inadequate. I think it is sad that as a continent, we still have our people, you know, like having to make these hard choices.
Yeah, that we're still having this conversation today.
It's either COVID-19 or it's death from hunger.
Right.
That we are still discussing things as basic as access to food. You know, it's really, it is totally sad. Yeah.
And so from that, do you think this is a time for opportunities? You know, there's like this saying that before the blessing, there's always a storm, right? Like, so this is actually what pushes maybe governments and decision makers to the reality of things. Is like, if for the number of years, you know, people have been having to choose between like, do they have sex with a wife or do they buy a contraceptive? You know, like those kind of conversations that is even just beyond me, because we're now in 2020. And actually maybe this is an opportunity that someone is thinking, I don't even have hand wash. Like, I don't even have soap right now. And so could this be an opportunity even just for young people across the continent? Whereas like maybe we're thinking differently about education, maybe we're thinking differently about entrepreneurship, we're thinking differently about how we access things.
Yes, obviously. I think one of the, you know, like one of the conversations that everybody's really kind of excited about is the question of resetting economies. I think it's interesting that you hear now even huge economies like the United States having these kinds of conversation. Should we really have to depend on China for our ventilators, for instance, for our masks, for our, you know?
Yeah.
So I think this is it's and I hope it's going to happen, some kind of reset of economies. You, for instance, have, I have read in newspapers that some companies in Ethiopia now are manufacturing masks, PPEs. And this is how we should have been thinking as a continent, not to rely entirely on other economies to, you know, think for us, to innovate for us. This is what we have been talking about. Let's stop teaching our children bricklaying. Let's start teaching them robotics. Let's start showing them how they can tinker with, you know, like with technology, with new machines and that sort of thing. It's an exciting time to see that these conversations are happening. And it's an opportunity for young people to innovate around these opportunities, because trust me, Google education may not necessarily work for a child in Uganda that is in a rural area. So how do young people then step up to innovate around these kinds of opportunities? I think it's exciting. What if this is the new normal?
Exactly.
Then what is going to happen to millions of children that have no access to the internet? You still have multilateral corporations, you know, making so much money off the internet. The internet is still incredibly expensive in some places. In some places, you have no access whatsoever. What if this is the new normal for the next 5 years? Then you can see that the children of the rich, of the wealthy, are going to progress. And then the children of the very vulnerable are going to become even more vulnerable. So you have more people falling back into traps of poverty. You have more young people unable to access healthcare because their dad does not own a car, so they cannot drive to the next, you know, to the nearby healthcare facility. So we need to not just raise awareness about the pandemic. We need to start questioning how, what measures our government's actually putting in place to make sure that these kinds of things do not happen again.
If there is one positive thing, like, you know, like this is such a challenging time, right? So it's like, is there any positive thing that we can leave with? Like, is there something that we can put in people's minds that, you know, it's not over? You know, like, when I talk about issues of development, the thing is, I don't want people to feel overwhelmed, like, oh, there you go, I guess we're all screwed. You know, it's like, is there a positive thing that we can leave with today?
I think I read a quote. I don't know if it was Alibaba. I don't know if it was a genuine quote, but it was, I think, advice to entrepreneurs. And he was saying, forget about plans for 2020. If you are still alive, that's an achievement in itself. I think right now, people need to focus on staying safe, you know, staying safe, but also believing, having faith that, I mean, the world has overcome so many big. I mean, who knew that HIV and AIDS, for instance, we would right now have ART? So people need to stay optimistic, and people need to be kind to each other. And I don't know, it's overwhelming. These times are overwhelming, especially when you have people losing their loved ones. It's not an easy time at all. But I think having faith that we will go through this, but we can only go through this together. So look out for each other, being kind to each other, and thinking beyond ourselves. I think that's really important. So if you can extend an act of kindness to another person, do it if it's possible, because we can only go through this together.
Ritah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been such a pleasure seeing you again.
Yes, baby girl, thank you, and good luck with everything. Stay safe, wash your hands.